Alexander Murdaugh actually wins one in the South Carolina Court of Appeals. They granted his motion for a stay to his appeal. What does that really mean? Is it really a victory? Will the whole case be retried? Let's take a look.
Jury tampering. What's going on in the Murdaugh case? I'm Lainey Law.
And I'm Andrew Myers. Welcome to About the Law. And this time we're going to talk about a new development in the Alexander Murdaugh case. As you, I'm sure, remember, Alexander Murdaugh was convicted of murdering both his wife and his youngest son, Paul, back in March of 2023. And there's been a development in the appeals court in South Carolina. And what is that all about? And we're going to show you right now. I am going to bring up the court order that the court issued. And what it is an order acknowledging that the appellant, that's Mr. Murdaugh, filed a motion to hold this appeal in abeyance and remand to the circuit court to allow him to file a motion for a new trial pursuant to Rule 29B of the South Carolina Rules of Criminal Procedure. Respondent, that would be the state, the prosecutors, filed a return. That's a fancy word for a response. And the appellant filed a reply. After careful consideration, we grant appellant's motion. This appeal shall be held in abeyance until resolution of the Rule 29B motion. Appellant shall provide this court with status updates every 30 days. Failure to file status updates may result in dismissal of this appeal. So you might ask, what is this all about? And what it's all about is that sometime after Mr. Murdaugh was convicted of the two murders and sentenced to 2 life sentences, then his 2 attorneys, Mr. Griffin and Mr. Harpootlian, came up with some very serious allegations that we'll get into in a little bit. The allegations were that the court clerk had tampered with the jury, which, if true, this is very serious. So the defense attorneys want to pursue a evidentiary hearing as well as a request for a new trial if merited. However, they couldn't do that until their appeal up at the upper level in the appeals court was stayed. It's a little bit of a technicality, but they needed to do this in order to go forward with this very serious charges. So this order from the appeals court in South Carolina is very significant in this case. Mm-hmm.
Now, my question to you, what is this going to change exactly? Because they already found him convicted guilty. Do you think that, is he going to have to go to the same judge? They have all the same evidence. What could possibly change the second time around?
Well, that's a very good question. Before they get there, they have to have an evidentiary hearing because the prosecution in South Carolina is questioning this and saying, well, we're not really sure it rises to that level. The prosecution has launched an investigation, which we can talk about. But if there is another trial, would it be the same judge? Will they have the same witnesses? I mean, this is major. And, it's very rare that these things actually get this far. And attorneys that have been practicing law for years and years and years have said that they've never actually heard of allegations like this, much less that they go this far. So if there's another trial, you're asking me, I say another conviction, but nothing's certain in this world.
So you don't think there's any chance that he would win at another trial?
Well, I did watch the trial. There was, evidence after evidence, witness after witness of him stealing money. One of his best friends, the guy he went to law school with, the couples would go out for dinner together. He stole money from him. Mr. Murdaugh's defense attorneys, Griffin and Harpootlian, had objected to this evidence going in. And then once it went in, they objected to the extent and the length and the number of witnesses, but they just kept going. And to my memory, for at least almost a week, maybe 4 days of testimony of the prosecution. And you see them there now, bringing in all this evidence of he stole money from his law firm. He stole money from his friends. He stole money from his clients. And these aren't allegations. He's now actually pled guilty to 22 counts in the federal court of doing all these things. So if there's another trial, The question is, would it be the same judge? And if it's a different judge, would a different judge rule differently on allowing all of that financial data in? So I guess a question would be, strip all the financial stuff out and just look at the charges that were brought against him and the witnesses. And, it still looks pretty bad for Mr. Murdaugh, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And what's confusing about all of this too, like speaking of money, is that I imagine that this going to court in the first place was very costly. I can't imagine that it's going to be cheap to do a whole nother trial and get all these people brought in again.
Well, the trial, like I just said, was 6 weeks long.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't keep count of witnesses, but there were dozens of witnesses. Not only that, there were 6, 8, maybe 10 attorneys for the prosecution. In fact, the Attorney General himself came down out of his office in South Carolina and actually took a witness and examined the witness. And so the amount of cost that this presented to the state of South Carolina is not only the money, but the time and the effort, and making sure there's a chain of evidence and that you have a witness for every single piece of evidence that goes in. I don't think I've read an actual price anywhere, and I have looked at this case a lot, but the answer to your question, it's a lot.
Yeah. But so now the issue is jury tampering. Why would they even think that the jury has been tampered with? What is going on behind this? How did we get to this point right now?
Well, two of Mr. Murdaugh's attorneys, Mr. Harpootlian and Mr. Griffin, held a really unusual press conference. In fact, when I got a little alert that something was going on in the case, of course, being the good legal investigator that I am, I brought it up. I could not believe what I was hearing. And at first I thought, these guys are crazy. But the more they talked, the more I realized that there was really something to all of this. Murdaugh's attorneys alleged that the court clerk herself was doing things like advising jurors not to believe Mr. Murdaugh's testimony and other evidence presented by the defense. They accused her of having frequent conversations with the jury foreperson. Bear in mind that the court clerk is a facilitator. I mean, I've tried jury trials, and the court clerk is there to make sure the jurors are comfortable, make sure that if they want a coffee break, reasonably, they can have a coffee break, that they get a lunch break. If there's a diabetic on the jury, that they get what they need to maintain their blood. The court clerk facilitates, makes sure that the jury gets documents that they need and all that. That's what a court clerk is. A court clerk is not to, and never in my experience, actually goes into the jury room and talks to the jurors, as is the allegation here. One of the allegations was that the court clerk, Rebecca Hill, pressured jurors to reach a speedy verdict. The allegation being that even smokers, and not that anybody should be a smoker in this day and age, but the reality and the fact is a lot of people, especially down south, are smokers. Mm-hmm. And she said, you can't smoke until you reach a juror. The one charge is that she misrepresented critical and material information to the trial judge in her campaign to remove one juror she believed to be favorable to the defense. Now, if that's true, that's way, way, way over the top. She had actually asked jurors for their opinions about Murdaugh's guilt or innocence. So all of that, if true, is way over the top. And the thing that caught my attention, not only how unusual this was that these two attorneys, stood outside the courthouse and actually went over all of these things, but they say that they have 3 affidavits from 3 jurors. So, an affidavit is a one-sided thing, but I mean, the charges are fairly substantial, the likes of which a lot of trial attorneys have not seen.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of ironic too, because you have this person who was trying to push them to make a decision, and ironically, that getting involved into the court is now what's bringing everything back and making things take even longer and making us revisit this whole thing, when theoretically, it could have been done if this person had just stayed out of it. But now you mention the court clerk, I thought that all this chaos was brought about to us by an egg lady. Can you explain to us what an egg lady is?
The egg lady, to the extent that there can be a little bit of levity in a murder trial. Towards the very end, one of the last days, there was a little bit of drama in that there were allegations that one of the jurors had talked or communicated through Facebook with their husband about this case. This is a real no-no. If you're in a jury, you're under strict orders not to discuss the facts of the case with anyone, even the other jurors. When you go back in the jury room, you're supposed to talk about the weather or the sports team or whatever. So Ms. Hill brought this one juror up before the judge and said, this juror has been talking about the case with people on Facebook, and she needs to be removed. And the judge questioned this woman, and she reluctantly agreed that she had to go. So on the way out, she says, I got to go back in the jury room. Oh, no, you can't go back in the jury room at all. You have to just leave. Well, I brought a dozen eggs, and they're in the jury room.
Oh, my God.
The judge, we're talking about a major, massive jury trial for murder, and the judge is talking to this juror about a dozen eggs. And so the arrangement was made that one of the bailiffs or someone would go back in the jury room, pick up the dozen eggs, and give them to her. So,
oh my God,
that's the egg lady. And it turns out that was probably fabricated. It turns out, according to the defense attorneys, that whole thing was fabricated. She may well have been able to go back into the jury room and do the deliberations and take her eggs home. But that's the egg lady.
I mean, I always keep a dozen eggs with me whenever I'm going out too. So
sure, yeah.
But maybe don't put me on the court stand. I might not be able to swear the truth to that. So tell me a little bit more about this chaos going on with the clerk. I heard she got into a little bit of trouble for writing a book. Why? What would be wrong with her writing a book about the case? Well,
it's pretty unseemly. There's no real law against it, I don't believe, and I haven't heard anybody say this, but it just seems that very little time passed after the case was all over, and she published a book called Behind the Doors of Justice, the Murdaugh Murders. It's her memoir detailing her relationship over the years with the Murdaugh family and in prevailing over the suit. And it has the appearance of impropriety. All of us in the judicial system, certainly attorneys and certainly judges and probably court clerks and everybody else, we have to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. So for her to have published a book that soon, that quickly after the whole thing, it's a gray area. I've heard other people say, and I think it's a gray area too. But, for her to have conducted herself the way she is alleged to have conducted herself, and then to come out with a book so soon after the whole thing, there's a question mark at the very least.
Mm-hmm. But if she's already been having these issues, why can't they just fire her?
Because she's elected. So you can't. She was elected, and my understanding is that she would have to be impeached, just like, whether you like the president or not. And I'm not getting anywhere near politics. You can't fire the president. He has to be impeached. A couple of members of Congress over the years have been impeached. But if you're an elected official, you can't just fire him. There has to be an impeachment. So, or a removal. Sometimes there's a removal process or some kind of thing like that. But it's not, you can't just fire her.
Now, Murdaugh has already been convicted.
Yep.
So because of this new trial, is he going to be able to be free while they try to figure this all out? Do you think that is he going to be staying in prison while this is all going on?
Yes, he will be staying in prison for two reasons. One, the order out of the court allowing a stay of the appeal only stays the appeal. Remember, there are two murder convictions with 2 life sentences in the lower court. Those stand unless and until there's a new trial. Those convictions stand. That's reason one. Reason two, Mr. Murdaugh, at some point after the first trial, actually went to federal court and pled guilty to 22 counts of various financial crimes, and the maximum sentence in those crimes is about 20 years for each of 22 counts. So he's pled guilty to those. There's been no sentencing yet, but at the worst case scenario or best case scenario, even if Mr. Murdaugh were found not guilty, which I and most observers find highly unlikely, he would then go over to the federal penitentiary. So Mr. Murdaugh is very likely going to be spending the rest of his life behind bars, and he's 53 years old at this time.
Mm-hmm. It's just interesting to me, like you said, it's just like very likely he's just going to be spending most of his life behind bars. It makes me question why even go through all this effort to try to deal with this, try to, you know, get the tampered jury and try to get this whole case redone over. It's almost like he's just trying to buy time for whatever reason.
Well, I mean, if you're a defendant, that's what you do. I mean, he vehemently denies his guilt, despite the evidence and despite the jury finding in that case. You know, who wants a murder conviction hanging over your head? He maintains his innocence. So, you know, you do that, you maintain your innocence and hope maybe you can do something with the federal charges. What? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Who wants a murder charge hanging over their head?
It's, you know, I mean, ultimately, like you said, it's their job that they're going to try to continue to fight this to the best of their ability, but it is just a wild situation. I mean, the know that you're going to be locked up, but still trying to fight it is, you know, an interesting choice.
Right. Okay. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this. There's not a whole lot to this. This is just one little bump along the way for Mr. Murdaugh. He got the procedural matter of the appeal stayed, and so that's it. There's a long road ahead of him. He hasn't been sentenced for the financial crimes, and he now has a request for an evidentiary hearing in the state court, and then maybe not a trial. So that's pretty much all there is to it today. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
And if you guys enjoyed watching this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. And we are excited and look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You have been watching About the Law, a production of the law offices of Andrew D. Myers in Methuen in the Merrimack Valley of Massachusetts and in Derry, just outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. Remember to click the like and subscribe buttons down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to share it with your friends and others. If you'd like to talk to me about an injury case, a car accident, a slip and fall, a serious bodily injury case, or some other case, please feel free to contact me. I'd love to talk to you. You can contact us through my website at attorney-myers.com. We have a contact us block, or you can call on one of the telephone numbers we've given there, or you can email me at andrew@attorney-myers.com. The foregoing is offered for informational purposes only. It is not intended as and does not constitute legal advice. Laws vary widely from state to state. You should rely only on the advice given to you during a personal consultation by a local attorney thoroughly familiar with state laws and the area of practice in which your concern lies. This podcast must be and hereby is labeled advertisement in some jurisdictions.